Welcome to our podcast today. We are going to discuss addressing community based challenges that arise from mental health issues. These mental health issues are serious. And by what we mean by that is that these serious mental health problems refer to persistent psychiatric disabilities. These can often have a profound or intense effect on the person's behavior, thinking, emotions, relationships. There are many different kinds of examples, but some that you might be familiar with might be something as common as depression. But what makes it different is that this would be a severe depression. This could be a chronically severe depression that has affected this person in their workplace, in their relationships, both marital or social. And that's really a big part of what this is. And there are other disorders such as schizophrenia and bipolar disorders. But the main issue that these disorders face is that it underscores the experiences of these disabilities as a major part of the difficulties faced by these people. So it's not based solely on the severity of the symptoms per se, but rather the effect that it's having on these individuals in their lives. There will be some individuals with serious mental health issues that are going to face incredibly difficult challenges as they follow what's known as a recovery process. Now, this recovery process isn't to say that they are going to have a cure or that something is going to miraculously fix or improve their condition. No, the recovery process to them might just be getting towards a new normal. Because, as I mentioned before, some of these conditions are chronic and lifetime conditions. So they're not likely to go away. Instead, what we have to do is reinforce approaches that promote liberation and well being. But you might be saying, well, what does this have to do with me? Like, how common is this for me to really care? Well, the National Institute of Mental Health in 2020 estimated that 14.2 million adults aged 18 or older in the United States were suffering from a serious mental health issue. This number represented 5.6% of all adults, or about 1 in 20 people. So if you've ever been to the mall and just looked around, well, there's a pretty decent chance that one of those people that you see in front of you are suffering from a serious mental health issue. But this topic is interesting because we as individuals have preconceived notions on people with serious mental health issues. And we have for hundreds, if not thousands of years. In the beginning, these people were maybe known as heretics or possessed by the devil. And then as science continued to flourish and we began to understand, well, we realized that no, these people aren't possessed by the devil, but they should still be separated from society. So we're going to put them in a psych ward and we're going to medicate them heavily, or we're going to do lobotomies on them. And then we realized that no, this isn't the best approach either, because these people are still people and they have their own rights and they have their own, uh, how best to say it, they have their own way of living that will help promote a happier life, a fulfilling life within the context of their serious mental health issue. So there are some challenging, so a main topic of this podcast will be to challenge the assumptions about mental health, about these mental health problems and the alternatives that relate heavily to this topic and how we tackle these issues, because this is vital for their population that has been ignored, ostracized, and misfairly treated in the grand scheme of mental health treatment. So we also want to identify maybe structural impediments. And in this podcast, we also want to discuss different topics and viewpoints about the community-based challenges that arise from mental health solutions. And we'll also want to discuss examples of mental health situations that may be occurring in real life populations, such as the homelessness population and the homeless population, and what we can do as a society, as counselors, and as regular everyday people to help those who honestly need it the most.
So that was very well explained. Cesar, are you done with that?
Yes, that's my part.
Okay, so I will be discussing two different components, so theories related to the mental health concerns and community-based challenges arising from mental health problems. So there are two topics that I would like to discuss. And the first topic will cover the basics for how ameliorative and focused treatment does not necessarily cover all concerns related to serious mental health issues or individuals that are affected by it. So meaning it confines the individual exclusively to the limitations of treatment and rehabilitation while leaving behind any interventions effort that will address problems like social like discrimination, social control, stigma, so which is more related to the transformative interventions. So having that in mind, a new paradigm is needed kind of like to help community support recovery and the participation of these individuals into the community. So it's fair to say that on that line that ameliorative care counts for just taking care of half of the problem, but not entirely. So in other words, while it contributes to part of the solution, it falls short addressing the social components that are intertwined to the individual welfare and well-being. Without the social component, we really cannot do much. So to give a little bit of overview, I think Cesar went over this part, but I'm going to touch upon just very superficial. So although some improvements have been made, and regarding to these individuals in society, there's still a lot of prejudice and biases about people that face serious mental health challenges. So in an attempt to find solutions, there's always discrepancies that have been there for competing values of compassionate care and social control. So for instance, concerning social control, like severely aberrant behavior was often seen as signs of demonic manipulation, requiring exorcism or imprisonment. So even though such a radical practices have changed, unless, of course, the person is a serial killer or another is, exclusive non-conforming behavior such as pedophilic behavior and so on. The average person living in communities in the past are those that continue today in today's society, still considering deviant and hiding this and excluding these people from society, ostracizing them from their communities, which this means, and living without addressing the social component of transformative care that will not happen if that is not addressed. So the next component that will be discussed will be the interventions that possibly contribute to transformative change in community mental health. In this case, specifically changing the poverty paradigm for survivors of psychiatric history in Canada. So in this case, I would like to discuss one of the examples that they presented in the book, which I found it really interesting and inspiring. And it's about the case of David Rothstein. He was an individual who refused to accept the stigmatizing level associated with mental health diagnosis. So he can share his thought regarding the issue of poverty and many psychiatric survivors that are dealing with the development of mental consumer-run business as a form of resistance. So he states, I am a psychiatric survivor. I survived the mental health system. They told me I could never work. Most of us here were told that we will never work again. So we say, screw that, we're going to start our own businesses. So he expresses that many psychiatric survivors are desperate poor They are poor because they have shut down, they have been shut out of the labor force. They are poor because social assistance rates are too low. They are poor because housing costs too much. So poverty is just part of the problem. The problem, the other part is the social exclusion that's go with it. So in 1973, Don Wilkes traveled to Toronto to Vancouver to visit the Mental Health Patients Association. So he returned home inspired. He was going to start a Toronto version of the Mental Patient Association, MPA. So in 1977, Don Alf Jackson founded Toronto, the first survivor group. So these people were members of the self-help group that were looking into ways to bring money into the survivors. So David says, we weren't going to beg or solicit. We were going into the flea market business. So Alf approached a friend of his who found in a small stall in one of his flea market buildings, which cost $10 to $20 a week. So we proved ourselves that the public and the public that they weren't a bunch of mentors, that we weren't a bunch of mentors incompetent. So in June 1980, with the support of some Community Economic Development, CED, the money from the city of Toronto opened a demand market. It used goods store that Don described as a hell of a lot more humane and empowering than any rehabilitation training, industrial therapy, or sheltering workshop. So the development of the business by survivors is not just a strategy to fight poverty. It is also a strategy to resistance. Survivors were resisting the notion that mental illness means that you can work. Survivors were refusing the permanently unemployable level that used to be prerequisite for a disability pension in Toronto, perhaps. And survivors were also saying that the mental health system had failed them. So this clearly shows how community-based approach can bring about transformation and change as long as there is an action behind, while not confining mental health survivors to just rehabilitation and training programs. So kind of like solution-focused approaches goes beyond the unexpected. So now David is retired. He teaches math people in history for 11 years at the School of Disability Studies at Ryerson University in Toronto. His chapter in Math Matters, a critical reader in Canadian Math Study in 2010, and was edited by Lev Francois, and poses the question, is math studies emerging as a new field of inquiry? It's kind of like lays back to whatever Cecil was telling about, let's make the inquiry, what is this, it's kind of like a new field that's coming about, and inquiring more about this issue.
All righty. Thanks, Eileen. And now I'd like to just talk about two topics and examples that are very important for for the interest of this podcast. The first one is going to be about homelessness. And we've talked about homelessness a lot throughout this book. And I think it could be a good way to explain what I'm about to explain right now. So think about when you see a homeless person on the street. Most people see a homeless person, and we all have our thoughts. At least for me, I notice a lot of people say, "Oh, that guy should get a job. Oh, he's just begging for money for beer or drugs." That's what I hear. I don't know what you may hear.
Yeah, those are those biases that people have about what you see on the street and stuff like that.
Exactly. And so, I want, people to think, and I've started doing this myself. You know what? Maybe that homeless person, maybe they have a serious mental health condition, and just it's really impactful what that can do. Because if you just start to think that maybe they have a serious mental health condition, then that's, I believe, how we can start moving towards transformative change. Because if we just say that, oh, he just wants money for beer, or he just wants to buy drugs, or he doesn't want to work, that's more amorative, and it's just about the problem. And then some people, they may have a serious mental health condition and they can't hold down a job. Maybe they want to, of course. you have, in any population, there's people that, are just deviant or whatever. But, we shouldn't assume that every homeless person just wants to buy alcohol and drugs. And so if we can start to have this approach, I think it can lead, to people being more transformative about, care for homelessness, because some of them do want to work, some of them do want to, have their own home, and, there are people that don't want to beg, but, we have to think about what else can we do. There are some shelters, but what, aside from that, what can we do? Can we try to provide them for jobs? And these are all complex questions. There's been throughout history, many different attempts, but I think that if we can start, just thinking transformative and not just looking at them just as deviant, if we can just start to open up that possibility, I think that that's when we can start moving towards transformative change, and probably address the issues with homelessness better. I know here in Miami, I did a little bit of research on that. Here in Miami, I noticed a couple of websites said that homelessness is down, but if you're in Miami and downtown Wynwood, there's a lot of homelessness, and so with all the businesses around there, we can come up, society, we can come up with some sort of, transformative change, to kind of incorporate them in society. And instead of, of outcasting them, shaming them, just try to find a way to include them, find a way to give them a job, find a way to, just help them get on their feet. And for people with serious mental health issues, it's hard, because when they get off their meds, it's, sometimes it's back to square one. So it's a long-term process too, especially if we're talking about people with serious mental health issues. But yeah, so as I said, for the first example, I think if we move towards, transformative change, instead of thinking about ameliorative change, I think that'll be a good way to move. And my second example for our podcast here is about what's going to be the future care. Caesar and Eileen already talked about the history, so I won't go over that again. But we need to kind of think about how are we going to care for people um, with serious mental health. Uh, there is one option, and this is transformative by nature, and this would be finding a way to incorporate them into, quote unquote, normal society. But this is it's easier, it's easier said than done. For example, um, how can we incorporate, somebody suffering from schizophrenia into normal society? Uh, being honest about it is not an easy task, but this is a starting point. We have to be creative and think about ways to do it. You know, uh, could we, for example, could we look at certain jobs that are good for schizophrenics? You know, and I think that just like homelessness, in general, anybody with a serious mental health condition, they just need not more necessarily more attention, but they need more commitment, because it's something, serious mental health conditions are something that are long term. It's not something that's going to get fixed overnight. And so, just like my example with homelessness, for the future care, we have to really come up with transformative change also, and just either find a way to include them, in our normal society, quote unquote normal, which is difficult, or find other solutions.
Thank you very much, Joe, for that. And I actually loved how you made us think about that in a on our own personal levels about that, about those two topics, especially with the homelessness. Because I feel like there are a lot of times that we tend to forget that um, we were we were those individuals too. You know, the ones. Yeah, I mean, even now, I think there are times where we still have those fleeting thoughts. But for me and you, for Caesar, for Aiden, we do things a little different. We have to think a little differently. So for this part of the second, for this part of the segment, I actually want us to um, just dig deep into that, and I want all four of us to actually like have like a conversation about that. What I want us to have a conversation about certain topics that we discussed or that was also discussed in the chapter in terms of what can be done to help to actually help support uh, persons with mental health problems. So one question that I actually do have is, excuse me as I pull it up again. So sorry. One question I do have is what can non-professionals do to help or respond properly to an individual with serious mental health problems? I know Gerald actually, tapped into some of those. And then if anyone else has anything else to add on to that. But I feel like this is very important to ask because again, we do see things from a professional light, but what can non-professionals do? What can everyday civilians do to respond to individuals who do have those serious mental health? What can you think of?
So I can go. I think a lot of people often judge those with serious mental health issues and feel like they have to do everything for them because they're at a risk of themselves, and it's almost like you don't even want to let them fail anymore. You want to protect them and shield them from everything. But I mean, failure is a part of life, and these people are going to make mistakes too, and it's okay for them to make mistakes and for them to learn from those mistakes rather than trying to decide everything for them because you think you know what's right. No, instead, I think that's something that, yeah, it might be a little difficult at first because you don't want to see, your loved one or something like that fail. But if it's going to help them in the long run, if it's going to teach them, and if it's going to let them have that kind of autonomy that they lack, then I don't see what's wrong so long as, they're not going to hurt themselves or hurt someone else.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
That's,
oh, go
go,
ahead.
go ahead.
Go ahead, Eileen, go ahead.
Um, I think also changing the connotation that is attached to the word schizophrenic or bipolar, meaning talk to these people like they're like we're talking to like somebody else. Like okay, I'm a schizophrenic. Well, okay, you're a schizophrenic. Okay, so what is the trying to change the paradigm behind the word, which is like what causes more the bias and the prejudice and people, um, and the behavior of the people, when they hear the word or someone disclose information to them. So kind of change that. And of course, excluding them, but seeing them as another human being, just regular. That the brain works a little different, perhaps.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think as I just mentioned, but I'll just reiterate real quick. I think something that a non-professional could just do is just understand the powerfulness, that's behind, just calling, instead of looking at a homeless person as, a drunk or a drug addict, just consider, hey, maybe they may have a mental health issue. Just give them the benefit of the doubt, and then if you're able to start looking at things from that point, at least giving them that shot, I think that's really powerful. because I think we just automatically go to that stereotype, you know. So or you can call out your friend, and they say, oh no, it's just drunks, call your friend out, be like, hey man, maybe they're not a drunk, maybe they just have a serious mental health condition.
Those are some great responses. I wanted to actually go back on what Caesar said, actually. And thank you all three for answering that. But I wanted to go back on what Caesar said. I think that's really interesting, right? Allow them to quote unquote fail, if that makes sense. Like allow them to live their life and let them go through the motions so that they can find their steps. And I don't know why that resonated with me, but it sounds different, Like it's not something you want to hear, especially when you're dealing with individual, especially when you're dealing with any individuals that are counted as like quote unquote deviants, like sometimes I feel like sometimes we go through those situations where we see someone who's counted as a deviant and we just don't care. But then, as Caesar mentioned, we're dealing with someone who actually is a loved one, right? Like getting to that place where we just want to say, hey, I'm going to let you go through your emotion. I don't want you to fail, but I think you need to go through this. I find that very powerful. I don't know why.
Because I mean, it's not something that I think we consciously think of. I think we all know that everyone is going to fail at some point, but you wouldn't want someone who you think is sick to be failing, because that just kind of resonates the wrong way with you, or it'll rub you the wrong way. You don't want someone who is sick, but these people are different. They're not sick in the same way that a normal person has, like a flu or a cold or something like that. These
Sure.
guys, these people, these individuals are sick in a different way that they that there's no cure for, that there's no way for them to change what they have, and they might have to live with whatever it is that they have for the rest of their lives.
Sure.
Therefore, we have to treat them at some point like regular people. Obviously, there are some things that there are some hurdles that they can't or won't be able to overcome in the same way that a normal person will. But they still need to experience all of life's challenges so they can just enjoy life and what comes out of it.
It's true. And I feel like that kind of ties in with what Aiden said. We need to change the narrative, right? We need to change the way we view or how we view individuals. Like we see someone as this. Again, I think actually what both of them said, along with Gerald, it's when we see an individual, I think we need to have like this very clear state, um, like a very blank canvas about them, especially individuals that we're meeting for the very first time. It's so easy for us to see someone talk to themselves on the street, right? And I think the first thing we think, I don't want to be close to that. I do not want to be anywhere near that. They're talking to them. Um, let's say that they actually have like a shopping cart full of a whole lot of clothes. I definitely don't want to be close to that. And these are actual raw thoughts that I feel like everyone had once a while. But I think changing that narrative and changing the viewpoint is probably one of the hardest things to do, right? What do you think is like, and anyone can ask this, but what do you think is like the first thing a person needs to do in terms of actually changing that narrative?
I think one of the main things with that narrative is that it's sort of a heuristic.
Mm.
You see someone pushing, a cart full of clothes, and it's easier, I think, naturally and cognitively, it's just easier to say, oh no, they're probably just drug addict, or they're probably just, just whatever. It's cognitively, it takes more effort to say maybe that person, you know, didn't have a good childhood. Maybe that person, has a serious mental health condition. So I think that's one thing that you can do. You can kind of understand that, it's like you said. I think you said it well. It's kind of natural, you know, and I applaud your honesty too, because that's a natural thought. We all think that,
Yeah,
when we see someone, for example, in the street pushing a car full of clothes, a homeless person, and I think it's just I think that is very simple. That is just very simple, just to don't just necessarily run and assume that they're a drug addict. Just take it back a little bit, you know. Give them the chance that maybe something else is going on.
yeah, definitely. I think adding on to that, I can also say on top of what you just mentioned, and what I just said previously, I think acknowledging those raw thoughts, I think is probably one of the essential things to do as well. Like I think we always have those automatic thoughts, that whatever we do, wherever we go, that's the first thing that's gonna come up. But acknowledging, and I don't know, anyone could, could disagree with me, but I feel like we have to acknowledge, like, hey, I'm actually thinking this. Like, this is something that I don't think I'm supposed to be thinking about right now, or actually quite even say this is okay for me to think about. I think the word okay is kind of hard for us to say, especially in our profession. Like, I think we need to learn how to say it's okay. Like, it's okay for me to think like this because this is like the rawest human emotion. However, I do need to change how I think about it. I don't know if anyone can agree with that, or, like, I don't know, have a twist on that. Let me know.
I think, Lawrence, yeah, when it comes down, I think relating to this issue, I think it's progressive. It has to be progressive, and to be cognizant about it and change the cognition behind that, you have to actually you have to educate people and be more open about it. Because what happens is right now, the bias and the stigma that is associated with this is because it comes from centuries, and people are conditioned to think a certain way. So I think as long as people get more exposed to, okay, this is a schizophrenia, and people talk, they hear noises and they hear voices, and okay, and their brain, this is what happened cognitively, and this is what happened with the chemical. Okay, so people should get more educated about it, and people should talk more about it. When people talk more about it, more open, becomes like people get more used to the theme and more used to be talking about this like another, like another subject. So I think all the stars there.
Media doesn't help either, like popular movies and stuff like that.
Right.
And you'll have something like, I don't know, like Split, where a person with schizophrenia or something like that has multiple personalities, and they can climb on walls or something, or that makes them the villain in like a movie or something like that. That doesn't help the situation. That doesn't help the communities that struggle with these conditions and that are already being, put down.
Well,
I forgot about that. Yeah, you're right. Go ahead, Joe.
I was just gonna say, most movie series, or TV series, they have like split personality. Like they don't show the people have a normal split personality. Of course, you have to show the person that has, one side is normal and the other person is like a massive killer or something. And so all those things don't help too, because that's all about, for example, split personality. Then you just associate that with everything, and then when you actually see someone that, or when you actually hear or know someone that has split personality, you just think the worst, because that's what and that's what you see on TV, and unconsciously, that's what we go off of.
I actually have while we wrap this up, I actually do have an interesting thought on that, right? Um, the media is literally, I find it to really be a double-edged sword, in a sense that it can expose, but it also overexpose, if that makes sense, right? Um, I like the fact how there are certain aspects of media, or like there are certain times when the media actually actually shows a movie, shows a TV show about a mental health issue, like especially a severe mental health issue, right? Or serious mental health issue, excuse me. I like how they actually expose those aspects of it, because it's not something a person would, on a day-to-day, would actually come across. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, a person is not always going to hear about a split personality disorder. A person is not always going to hear about bipolar disorder if it's not from their friends. Um, they're not going to always get that high level exposure from these types of topics. And I sometimes find that I like how they put a spin on it, but at the core value, they actually are putting some type of exposure. Now, I will actually absolutely agree. It doesn't make any easier, especially for our professions where we have to educate individuals like that. It doesn't really make it any easier because, just like Caesar said, like they're thinking someone with split personality disorder is an individual who could probably fly on one hand, and on the other hand have super strength. Is it possible? We don't have the research, but not the flying part. But is it possible? We don't know. But when we have to go to our personal sessions, when we have to talk to individuals on a day-to-day rotation, I feel like it makes it very hard. But I can at least be happy they know something about it, so they can start doing the research themselves. I don't know. Again, it kind of sounds like a bit of a stretch in terms of what I said. And again, I could be so wrong, but I do like the other aspect of it. But yeah, you guys are right. It makes it super hard. But I just wanted to again thank you guys for listening in to our podcast. We do appreciate you for listening, and thank you, group members, my colleagues. You guys did an awesome job with this.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Thanks.